How do two groups with a common past become different species?
How do you film in a small room when you can't remove a wall?
Get squished. Those answers and more starting now. Hello, I'm Mohamed Noor, a biology professor at Duke University and an occasional science consultant with the Star Trek universe. Thank you for tuning into BioTrekkie with the Admiral. I'm here with the Admiral herself.
I'm Jayne Brook. I played Katrina Cornwell, Admiral Cornwell, in the first two seasons of Discovery, and I am here today as Mohammed's friend and as an enthusiastic biology student looking to learn more about biology here on Earth through the lens of Star Trek. So today we're going to be discussing episodes 6 and 7. So Mohammed, diving right in, can you tell us a few things that jumped out at you in these episodes that you can expand upon for us?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So first, in terms of the reunification of Romulans and Vulcans in episode 7, this was on Navarre, that made me think about what happens in nature when you have groups or tribes that are separated for evolutionary time and they come back together into contact. That's often called secondary contact in biology literature. We can talk about that a bit. I'm very excited about that because that actually connects with my PhD dissertation. In episode 6, right before it, we had that Andorian, I think his name was Rin, who had his antennae cut off. But it got me thinking about antennae, like, what do the antennae do in Andorians? Could they grow back and do they grow back in other species? This wasn't something I knew a lot about ahead of time, so I did some reading on that to prepare for this. And then the last, quick one, sort of in episode 6, we had our favorite feline off in a spaceship by himself for weeks. So what happens when you're off by yourself for weeks as a cat alone? Is he being fed? Is his litter box changing? What's happening?
That's very good. In the future, maybe they have self-cleaning litter boxes, and they do even now have
the ones that
things
comb
that
through.
let out a little food every day. I don't know if Book arranged all that before he left, but he must have.
I guess so.
For his beloved grunge, right?
Grunge. Yeah.
Grunge.
Maybe they have programmable matter litter box grains.
Right. That's actually very good. I want that to be invented.
Oh yeah.
So let's dive into that first one. That's really cool. That
Sure.
Excellent episode 7.
Definitely.
For so many reasons. But this idea of the Romulans and the Vulcans having come from a common past, and then to the point where they're just completely different species. So tell us more about that.
Sure. So Admiral Vance, fellow admiral, said these were two tribes separated, two tribes of one species that were separated for a long time. Now, it's of course common that tribes or populations of species here on Earth gets isolated or separated, not usually on different planets, of course, but they're separated by being on opposite sides of, say, a big river, or maybe a mountain range comes up over evolutionary time, something like that. Now, this is thought to foster a lot of differentiation. Like, they become more and more different the longer they're apart, because they're not exchanging migrants. There's no genes going back and forth between them. So let's say there's a northern and a southern population, just for example, different mutations will arise in each population. The environment might be slightly different. So there's different environmental pressures. You have different random chance events. And, so over time, they should expect to become more and more different, not just culturally, as is the case with Romulans and Vulcans, but also biologically. And we actually see this in Star Trek too, that in Picard, or the series Picard, not the person, the Romulans from the south have smooth foreheads, where the Romulans from the north have those big ridges. That was a bit of a retcon later on, because this was something that was just different in the earlier series. So they explained it then in Picard. But just generally speaking, isolation greatly helps differentiation to occur, and ultimately helps lead to new species forming. Now, the big question is, what happens when you have this secondary contact, when you have this reunification, to use the episode title there? There's a couple of different possible outcomes. One outcome would be what we saw in humans, that yes, we have, for example, different tribes of humans in different populations over a long time. They came back together, but they're not really that biologically different. They might have some slight differences in appearance or skin color or something like that, but it doesn't really affect anything. And, they can interbreed and eventually things just kind of wash. That's one extreme. The other extreme is that they actually are so different that now they're completely different species. meaning that, for example, they're completely not attracted to the other type. Like, you see the Romulan with the forehead ridges, you're like, oh, I don't want any part of that. So,
Right.
or something more physiological, maybe like you can actually interbreed, or maybe the sperm don't fertilize, or they do fertilize, but the hybrids are sterile. So those are the two sort of end points. Now, there's an interesting middle point, which is actually where my dissertation was focused. What happens if there's some disadvantage associated with hybridizing, with mating with the other type? But let's say, for example, maybe one sex of the hybrids is sterile, but the other sex is fine. So it allows a conduit for some genes to pass, but you're not all the way different in terms of different species. So there was a theory that's been around since in some different forms all the way since the 1890s, but it was really sort of elaborated around like 1940 or so. And its theory is called speciation by reinforcement. And this is what my dissertation focused on. So the idea there is you have two populations that there's some cost interbreeding, right? Like one sex of hybrid is sterile. If that's the case, and let's say that you can have some individuals mate at random within this population, and some individuals mate preferentially with their own type. Who has more or more healthy offspring?
Oh,
The ones that have more or more healthy offspring will be ones that mate preferentially with their own type, right? Because then all their offspring are healthy, and and they reproduce faster and things like that. So over time, you can have natural selection favor breeding only with your own type. And then as that process continues over time, you essentially you complete the process of speciation through natural selection to prevent mating with the other type.
Because the hybrids simply aren't fertile.
Well, it's not that they're completely infertile, but they're maybe just less fertile. Like if they're
Yeah,
completely
so
not fertile, they're already separate
a
species.
lot of their children don't survive. Is that the
Exactly.
idea?
Or don't pass on their genes. Maybe the kids
Oh.
survive, but they don't pass on their genes to subsequent generations.
They don't pass them on because they have been born sterile?
Exactly. Exactly. So
Okay.
this was something I tested actually as part of my graduate dissertation. I looked at two different fruit fly groups. So I'll call them species A and species B because the names are really technical. But
Right.
species B is found just in California, or where you are. Species A is found, actually California, the whole West Coast too. The other one's found California, West Coast, but also goes much further eastward. So what I did is I sampled individuals of species B, the ones that's found in both places. And if you took the ones that overlap with the other species, they very much didn't want to mate with the other type. If you took the ones that had never encountered other species, they didn't care. They're like, okay.
They didn't know the difference.
Nope.
They didn't know that their children might be sterile.
Exactly. And of course, it's not actually knowledge. It's just natural selection happening in the sense that if they have the preference and it's an innate preference, then their genes get propagated more over time.
Do they look the same? These two species?
Particularly, these two species look absolutely the same. Yeah, you cannot tell them apart.
So I wonder
when you collect, you don't even know which ones you have. You have to actually do genetic tests or something like that on them to tell which ones you have.
But somehow B knew not to mate with A.
Yeah,
somehow knew.
It's interesting. So with these flies, they actually sing courtship songs, but not vocally.
Oh.
What they do is the male will come out beside the female and extend his wing and vibrate it. And if you actually watch it, you can actually see the difference between the two species. But what I would do is I would do these sound recordings, and you could actually see the difference between.
Oh, so they have different dances.
Exactly.
The male does.
Exactly.
Oh,
exactly. And the females then tune in. The males are indiscriminate, but the females would tune in like, "You're the right kind. That's okay." And
you're the right kind of male. You're the wrong kind of male.
Exactly. You could cut off the wings of the males and then play like a sound and then get them to mate with the right kind or not, or refuse to mate with the right kind based on. Yeah.
Now that sparks a question that comes to my mind. So this happens in bird populations a lot because this just came to my mind. We get certain kinds of orioles here in California. And there's a big difference between the Bullock's orioles and the hooded orioles, but you do sometimes get ones that have mated with some birds that have flown a little bit further west or some birds that have gone a little bit further. Do you know anything about whether or not those birds who crossbreed a little bit, if they also suffer from this?
Interesting. So
from this, I wonder. This idea just came into my mind because I love birds and they come to my yard, and sometimes I'll see a bird that coloring appears to be a mixture of two different breeds.
Yeah, so I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, but that's not species. Those are the same species.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that specific. And it's possible something like that could happen. I know there are some birds or other sorts of animals that have like a specific kind of coloration, and then you could have an offspring that has, like, say, an intermediate coloration that is disadvantageous either because it's not attractive or because it's, for example, not
Oh,
a good mimic. Maybe let's say like one is mimicking one type, one's mimicking the other type, and you have this intermediate. It's like, okay, that's easily
okay.
prey.
You're just not going to be popular at all.
There you go.
Right.
Exactly,
All right.
exactly.
But I think that I'm doing that civilian thing of mixing up the difference between species, which is a huge difference, and the difference between different breed, different variations of the same kind of bird or
Yeah.
breed is the word that I use. I don't even know if I'm using the right word. So
No, that's totally fair. That's totally fair. And
yeah,
it's
those are
interesting.
different things.
Exactly. And it's an interesting thing about that with respect to the Romulans and Vulcans too, because you might wonder whether this reinforcement thing could apply to them. But that's very unlikely for two reasons. One is a biological reason,
Yes.
and one is actually a writing reason, interestingly. In terms of the biology, it's very unlikely to apply because, given that humans and Vulcans can interbreed just fine, probably Romulans and Vulcans, which are separated much more recently, they probably will produce hybrids that are just fine. And we saw that what was her name?
We
She-Ra?
saw one of the
Yeah,
one of the quorum. She was
exactly.
you had a pure Romulan,
Romulo
a pure
Vulcan.
Vulcan, and yeah, and a mixed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I assumed that meant biologically, not just culturally, but I mean, they didn't actually
Oh, I
specify that.
think biologically.
That
I
was what
think
I
it
thought
meant it
too. Yeah.
biologically.
So that's the biological reason. But the writing reason that I'm pretty sure that the writers would avoid anything that would be perceived as potentially advocating for xenophobia or racism or something like that. I think they would be like, nope, we're not going to say anything's
No.
bad about interbreeding. No.
Right.
Which is good.
That's for fruit flies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, that seemed to be. I thought that was actually interesting that you had the purist Vulcan, and then you had the Romulan who wanted to compromise a bit, and then you had the one in between. But yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
and then of course you have Michael, who's human, but brought up as a Vulcan, so all very mixed.
Yep. Yep.
And then you have human Vulcan as well with Spock. But
That's right.
so is there anything else that you
Not on
want to
that
say
one.
about the okay?
Not on that one.
So the next thing you brought up is the antennae from
Yes.
episode 6, and you were
Yes.
referring back to other Star Trek episodes
That's
as well.
right.
Tell us
That's
about
right.
that.
Sure. So in terms of the androids, so they have antennae. You have to wonder, like, what do these antennae even do, right? These little nubs with a little hole in it, right? So just here on Earth, we see antennae in arthropods, so things like crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, things like that have antennae, or insects, of course, have it too. Spiders usually don't, so that's kind of interesting. But we see things like antennae in snails, and they have their little eye stalks and stuff like that. Sometimes the other things, but those are mostly really formally tentacles because they're fully retractable and stuff like that too. They're really cool in terms of the diversity. I don't know if you've seen like pictures of antennal diversity. Like it looks really different across species, but sometimes even between the sexes. So one example I love is a lot of moths. What happens is the male moths like seek out female moths. And if you look at a female moth, it's just like one little stick. It's kind of like your old rabbit ear as antenna from your TV set from a long time ago, right? That's what the female moths. Males have these much more intricate antennas. It's like they have sticks, but they have all these little hairs all across it because they're really trying to sense and locate where things are. And that sort of illustrates part of what antennae often do. They're often for either chemosensory, for like sensing chemicals, or for mechanical sensing, things like that. So that's a cool aspect there. Now with the androids, like you said, this has come up in the context of Star Trek before. So Shran, who's played by Jeffrey Combs, the ever talented, in Star Trek Enterprise, there was a scene there where Captain Archer cut off one of his antennae in the fight, and Shran was okay. It's like it didn't kill him, obviously, as is the case with Rin here. But he was off balance. Like he couldn't walk. And the doctor told him, like, it's going to take you a couple of days to readjust. So it seemed like they use it in some way for balance, kind of like we use our inner ears, the hairs in our inner ears. Maybe they have something inside their antennae that do that. So that was kind of interesting. And there are moths that actually use it for balance, not in the same sort of way like that, but more like while they're flying. Some moths will actually do that too.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Is it used for balance in any species here on Earth, but just a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know about just walking around, but I think there's some moths that use it in terms of with flying to help with balance. So
it's really they use it more to locate the female, or
stuff like that. More often things that are chemosensory.
More to figure out where they are in space in a way.
Yeah, stuff like that. But one thing that did come up, which was interesting story-wise, is with Shran, they said that his antenna would grow back in 9 months. So I'm guessing that would be true also for Rin in this case, right? I mean,
we're gonna have to watch.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe next season he'll have antennae if he's still around.
Right. Well, didn't Now I could get this wrong. Didn't the what did you call them with Doug's character? You know, with didn't
Oh,
the
you think
fear
about the threat ganglia on the back
the
of
ganglia,
the
that's what the
yeah.
word. Didn't those grow back? They
No,
seem
I
to
think they
have
just
grown
fell
back.
off. No, they just fell off
No,
completely. I
they
think.
fell off, but then I thought that
Oh, he
in the
gets the little
first
spikes.
episode
He
of
can shoot.
this,
Oh, does he have them
yeah,
back?
in the first episode of this season, I thought
Oh.
something came up to, and I was like, wait a minute, those fell off. He let those
He
go.
did in the second episode. He shot the spikes out of the back of his neck. So maybe that's what
Yeah,
you're thinking of.
okay. Maybe that's what
Maybe
I'm
that's what it was.
thinking of. Because I
Yeah.
was like, wait a
I think that was part
minute.
of their
Yeah,
Vaharai that they just lose the threat ganglia for good.
right, right. Yeah. That's what I got slightly confused for a second there. Um, so we've done episodes 6 and 7 with the biology compared to here on
Yeah.
Earth. And what about, I know you have one more question.
I have a question for you.
Oh, no, but you have a question. I see what you have in your hand
Oh
there.
yeah,
Another
grudge.
biology question.
I didn't have anything more to say about that, but it was just a fun one.
Yeah, I want to wonder. Yeah, good. Okay, so you have a question for me.
Yeah. So one thing I noticed, and this was especially apparent to me in a couple of episodes we were watching, like for example, when they were on Book's ship, there's a lot of space on that
Well, it
ship.
was huge. Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
that's
there's
true.
so much empty space. Like you're walking, like what does he do? Does he have like a track there? Like why is it so open like that? And I noticed like when they're in
I
engineering,
want a house that big.
right? Or in engineering or on the bridge, there's so much room.
Yeah.
So it made me wonder: is there a reason why they tend to have these things so big? You know, in Star Trek or in sets like that. Sure.
So I can't speak for design, production design, but I can say it looks cool from, I mean, from a viewer's point of view. It's a beautiful, these things are beautiful designs. They look great, but also from a practical point of view, when you're building sets that you're going to film in again and again with that many actors, it is important to have room for the cameras. I mean, in Discovery, they sometimes have, you know, they'll have 3 cameras there at once. So you have to be able to move and move between people. I know that
Mhm,
in
mhm,
other things I've done, you know, if there's an apartment, it's really great if they can build a character's apartment on a stage because
mhm,
they'll build it with removable walls
mhm,
so that if you're having an intimate scene, they can remove a wall and the camera can be outside.
mhm,
When you have to film in a practical room, because that's the location they want to film in, it is cramped.
mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
it's really hard to get all the equipment and the people and the cables and the everything in there. So I can only, that's interesting that you noticed that. I know that it looks great, but it also seems to be practical. Yeah.
Yeah, it does look really cool. I'll give it that. But it is kind of just funny, just in terms of like, wow, that's a lot of space, especially when you're presumably
Yeah.
trying
How
to
do they do
like.
it aerodynamically?
Right. Well, I mean, aerodynamics they're in space, so that part's okay. I was thinking just more in terms of maintaining pressure and things like that in that big
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. I guess that's what I meant. Yeah. All
Yeah.
the, how do they, yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Well, I guess bookship. You are right though. Aerodynamics bookship does go into atmospheres all the time. I mean, we saw it land a few times here. So yeah, I guess aerodynamics does apply there too. That's a
Right.
good point.
Right.
That's
Right.
a good
Because you
point.
got to land.
Yeah.
Um, But no, the things that strike me and that continue to strike me, I sound like a broken record, but I am just so loving this season. I think the writing, I mean, the last episode we just talked about, episode 7, was
Yeah.
just excellent. That scene, I love the sustained scenes
Hmm.
better in any TV show than when it cuts too fast between scenes and I can't keep up. But this was just so beautifully written, so moving. The
Yeah.
mom as advocate, who's
Mostly
absolutely
advocate.
like cutting it straight. Yeah, that was cool when it was mom. I mean, that was great. But I just love all the characters. I love Tarina. I think that's how she
Yes.
pronounced her name. I loved
The
the
Vulcan president.
president of what did they call the world of the Vulcans and the Romulans? They called it. I wrote it down
Navarre.
here. Yeah, I loved her. I continue to love Book and all the main cast. I feel like Sonequa, I mention her every week, but episode 6, Giorgio, I'm very
Oh,
curious to know what they're going to do with her
yes.
character. It's very
Yes.
interesting to see that something's happening with her.
Yeah.
Plus, she has all those fun lines. I mean, you know, you had me at
Unsanctioned
unsanctioned
mission.
mission, or when
I
she
love
goes, you
that.
know, everyone, I mean, she has all these fun lines and she has fun delivering them, or I love me. she
Yeah.
said in one line. And so I'm loving Giorgio and
I loved her teasing
Blood.
Michael about the past boyfriend. What's his name? The Klingon guy.
Yes.
That was hilarious.
Was it Tyler?
Yes,
No.
yeah,
Was it,
exactly.
yeah,
Ash
yeah.
Tyler, yeah. I
Ashley,
love
but
that.
she, yeah, everybody. I think Anthony has a really kind of relaxed, solid, sort of twinkle in the
Oh, I
eye
really like how they're doing him
kind
this
of
season.
delivery.
Yeah.
You know, like with the goo when he goes,
Mhm.
oh, gooey, you know, like
Yeah.
there's just like little moments where I go, it's sort of like he's giggling on the inside, and it's really kind of delightful to watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So many, uh, you know, of course, we just mentioned Mom coming back, and she's fantastic. And
Yeah.
so I'm really, really enjoying the acting. I'm really enjoying the writing. I find it has depth and
Yes, definitely.
really,
And they did their
trying to think of,
homework on that last episode. Oh my gosh. I mean, the
yeah,
connections from Next Generation and from everything else. And, and their comments about how, well, you wouldn't have known this in your time, but the Vulcans and Romulans are from different times. But it's true because in terms of, I think it's in the original series, which is set after season 2 of Discoveries, when they first see the Romulans. Like they'd fought them before, but they hadn't seen them. But that was, they were on top of that. The fact that like
they were, yes,
they wouldn't know what a Romulan looked like and that they looked like a Vulcan. So that was very interesting to bring that up. But they were on top of it.
And then I watched those other parts 1 and 2 in Next Generation, and taking taking what Spock, way older than when Michael Burnham left him, but when that he had wanted to bring them together, and it had not happened even in his lifetime, but here we see that it had happened. And then anyway, it was very
it was moving. I mean, seeing your brother
moving.
So much older, like, oh.
I know. So that was, yeah, it was very moving. So many, I'm forgetting every time I say something, I'm thinking there's equally something I'm forgetting, but I'm just very much enjoying the writing and the acting and the directing, and of course the production design, and even the title sequence. I called my daughter over because she's very artistic, and I'm like, look at this is so cool. This is what artists do, draw things like this as well. And anyway, I'm really enjoying this season so much.
Me too.
Bravo.
Very much so. 2 thumbs up to the writers and actors. Absolutely. And everybody.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah. It starts with the writers, though. It really does. Yeah. It does. Can't do anything if they don't write something.
That's very true. Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, just those positive, bravo. Yeah. Carry on. I look forward to the next episodes.
Yeah, thanks for the insights too on the wall thing. I guess that's where the expression "the fourth wall" comes from.
Well, the fourth wall comes from theater. Okay. So theater actors, of course, are acting. They might be in their living room and they're facing the audience, but they have to create a fourth wall. So for them, what they are looking at might be out a window, but obviously the audience is out there. So I'm looking out a window now, but I would create my fourth wall. So for TV, I guess it would be the same thing. If I was filming here and somebody was filming me, I would have to create a fourth wall for myself and ignore the camera. So yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, learn something every time. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's always fun.
Yep, ditto. And thank you all for tuning in to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. Tune in next time when we go over episodes, I guess it'll be 8 and 9 then. Wow.
8 and 9.
Wow, we're trucking through.
Carrying on, yeah.
All right.
All right.
Live long and prosper.
Thank you. Bye.